So if you're like me, you browse Gear Talk and you see these boards with $5,000 worth of pedals on them, and you just say to yourself, why? Like, why do you need all this stuff to play a few songs on Sunday? So I wanted to make a video showing what I would do as a player who's been playing for a long time. If I were just starting out building a board for a worship environment, the direction I would go as a beginner. I'd start with the Pedal Train Junior. You can just get that used for like $100. Can't beat Pedal Train. It's light, it's reliable, it's solid. For your compression and drive, Robert Keeley is coming out with a new pedal called the Tone Workstation, which has a compression and two of his drive pedals built in to one enclosure. In a worship setting, a good way to use a compressor is to lengthen your sustain but not squash your attack so much. And a great way to achieve this is with a blend control on a compressor. So the compressor that I use, the Exotic SP compressor, has this control. Analog Man just came out with his revision 5 of the compressor, which is his version of a Ross compressor. It has a blend control now. So what that allows you to do is to blend in your clean tone so it doesn't squash your attack so much. This allows you to use your volume knob to clean up your signal, but still roll it up and dig in to get a lot of distortion when you need it. But it also lets you get a lot of sustain with even with like a Telecaster with single coils, low output pickups, or Strat. The second part of the Keeley Tone Workstation is his 1964 overdrive or the Katana Boost. I would recommend on this pedal to use the 1964 position, which is an overdrive based on a blues breaker circuit, which a lot of popular worship overdrives are based on, like the Morning Glory or the King of Tone, which is what I use. It's a fantastic sounding overdrive for worship. It's real sparkly, but it's also very uncompressed, so you can roll back your volume knob and clean it up really well. But when you dig in, it'll really break up really good. The next part of the Tone Workstation is his Tube Screamer mod, which is pretty famous at this point. I personally have the Keeley Red Dirt Mini, which is exactly what is built in this pedal. Personally, I really like for a lead tone a blues breaker circuit into a Tube Screamer or Klon circuit, which are both very mid-heavy, which can give you a really good lead tone to stick out in the mix for a big lead part. So this pedal is really, really great, and I've used all three of these pedals individually, just not in one package like it is here. So I can personally attest that the compressor is great, the 1964 circuit is really good, and obviously the Keeley Tube Screamer is fantastic as well. So it'll give you 3 levels of gain, or really 4. You can have both overdrives off. You could just have the 1964 on most of the time, which is probably what I would do, and then just clean it up with my volume knob. You could just have the Tube Screamer on, and then you could stack them for a lot of gain for a big lead part. So the next pedal I would put on my board, and then this is the pedal that I have on my main board right now, is the Dunlop mini volume pedal. It's really small, it's pretty light. It has an expression output or a tuner output. It works as an expression pedal too. I A-B'd it with a true bypass looper to make sure that there's no tone suck or anything, like sometimes people complain about with the Ernie Ball, and it doesn't have any tone suck. There's a big angle for your foot, so even though it's a small pedal, it still feels really good when you're using it. So this is obviously an important part for worship, so you can do swells and stuff to fill space in between songs or on a low part or something like that. So this is a great pedal. I had the really expensive Hilton volume pedal for a long time, but I didn't like how it had an off-point knob, so I could never really get it to be exactly where I wanted it to be when the pedal was full toe position. It was either a little too loud or a little too quiet. So the next pedal is pretty famous. A lot of guys use this still, even though it's old, is the Boss DD20. It has 4 presets, which should be enough to get you through a set of a few songs. The way I would set this up and the way I had it set up when I had this pedal was preset 1 was a dedicated swell preset. It's just a big old tape delay that goes really, really long. And an important part about this pedal is that it has trails, which means when you hit the bypass switch on the pedal, the repeats keep going, which is really important if you're doing a swell or doing a real big ambient part and you need to switch to the next part of the song. When you turn that delay off, you want those parts to keep going so it doesn't cut off immediately like it does in a true bypass pedal. This is really useful because it'll help you transition to the next part of the song without having a jarring cut off of your delay sound. Same goes for reverb pedals too that you might have on your board. You don't want them to cut off the sound immediately when you turn them off because it can be really jarring out in the house. So to use the DD20, you'll need to get an external tap tempo switch, which you can get online for like $30. So the second preset should be just a medium mix quarter note, probably an analog sound or a tape sound. It's not really important. Then if you need a little bit more mix or a little bit less mix, you can just dial the mix knob. The third preset, I would just use a dotted 8 sound, which is really common in worship music. Again, you can bump up the mix and bump up the tone if you need to for big U2 sound, or you can dial back the mix and dial back the tone if you want it to be darker and less bright in the mix, but still be there. And the fourth preset you could just use as like a slapback, or maybe a longer delay, like above 200 milliseconds for a big solo delay or something like that. If you need another preset, you can even use the manual mode, which is just where the knobs are at any certain time. So when you rotate through the presets on the DD20, when you get to 4 and then you go back around, the first preset is the manual mode. So you could set that up to how you need it for that particular set. And then obviously for each sound, you would just tap in the tempo of the song and it would get you where you need to be. The next pedal I would recommend having is the Digitech Polera and the Boss RV6. And these are both reverb pedals. And the reason I have 2 on here is for 2 reasons. They both have trails, which means, again, they don't cut the sound off as soon as you turn them off, which is important for swells. And then you also need some sort of reverb that's always on, in my opinion. Otherwise, your tone is very, very dry, and it doesn't sound very good in a mix, in my opinion. So how I have my rig set up is on the Kemper, I have a small room reverb that's on all the time, and then I have different presets on my Big Sky that I can jump to when I need to for the song. But in this case, since we're trying to be on a budget and we're just starting, I would just have one reverb that's on all the time, low mix, pretty low time, so it's not getting all muddy when you play a lot of notes, and a second reverb, which in this case I've picked the Boss RV6 because I used to have the RV5 and it was fantastic, especially in the modulate mode, with a big high mix and a long time setting. For swells, it was really a great sounding pedal for that. So with just 2 reverb pedals and turning some knobs, you can get through a set easily. One is an always on, and then one is just for swells, which is pretty much the 2 sounds you need. You could bump up the mix and the time on the Polera if you needed to for a song. Like if you needed a little bit more reverb but not a huge swell sound that would just get real muddy if you were playing a lot of notes underneath it. So the nice thing about this layout is that all the jacks are spaced, it's light, it'll cover a lot of ground, and then it's buffered as well. So on this board we have 3 pedals that are buffered, which is a little excessive, but it doesn't really matter. Some guys will say, oh, having too many buffers in your chain is a bad thing, but if you A/B it, there's no way you can tell. It's impossible to tell. It is important to have at least one buffer towards the end of your chain so that can drive the signal run to your amp, so that the capacitance of the cable that you're using doesn't negatively affect your tone, and chop off a lot of your high end and your clarity before you even get to your amp. If I were building a board for the first time and I was a worship player just starting out, this is exactly what I would do. I might pick up one of these Zoom pedals. I use this for a long time. Zoom has really stepped up their game in the past few years when they released this multi-stomp series. You can run 6 effects at one time. You have to preset everything in advance, obviously, but I was using this as a noise suppressor, always on. I had it set to a vibrato I used a lot, or maybe a chorus, depending on the song, and then I could just bump that on when I needed it for the set. I don't use a lot of modulation effects, but here and there you need them. So this can kind of cover all of those modulation effects that you would need, and you can pick this up for less than $100 used. It's a great little pedal. It's really ugly, but it sounds really good, and this is a pedal where you definitely get more than you pay for, and this would fit on the Pedal Train Junior very easily. So definitely recommend this pedal if you need a little bit of modulation, but you don't want to have a separate $200 tremolo pedal and a separate $200 vibrato pedal and a separate $200 chorus pedal. This can cover all of those, and just because it's Zoom, you got to get over that because it really is a good pedal for the money. So how do we power this board? It's very important to use isolated power for your board, but you don't have to buy a $300 brick power supply from Voodoo Labs to achieve that. So what I recommend newer players, and for most people, is to use a daisy chain, but then you can get adapters for the daisy chain that isolate your pedals. So you can use a one spot, which is like $30, and then from the gig rig, you can pick up one of these, which is called an isolator. Now this has 4 isolated outputs, and you can just plug in your one spot into here, and then you'll have 4 outputs that each output about 180 milliamps, and they're all isolated. So you could use this for your tuner, and then I would use it for the 3 digital pedals that we have on here. Usually analog pedals work pretty well with daisy chains without making a lot of noise. So with the combination of the $30 one spot and this, which costs $70, that's $100, and you have fully isolated, quiet, clean power for your whole board. So in this video, I'm kind of already assuming that you have some cables and a tuner, but if you don't, great cables to use, and what I personally use on my board is the Lava soldered cables. I used solderless for a long time, but they kept failing, so I switched to soldered, and I haven't had any problems since. They sound really good, they're very clear. And then for a tuner, if I was just starting out, I would grab the Donner DT Deluxe tuner, which came out recently. It's $30, and it has a strobe mode. That's all I care about, is that it has strobe and it's fast. Because if you're sitting there and you're trying to get it to tune, you know, those 2 or 3 seconds during a song might seem like an eternity when you're supposed to start the song, or you know, something's out of tune and you need to switch, like you have a small break in the song that you can tune a string really fast. You want it to be as fast as possible with no delays. The reason I recommend this pedal over like the Polytune, which I used for a long time, several years, is that the Polytune mode is pretty gimmicky. Like, it doesn't really tell you exactly what you need to do to get it to be in tune. I like to just tune one string at a time, and even when I was trying to do that, it would switch to the Polytune mode sometimes, and then it would take a couple seconds to switch back, and all that time is just complication and aggravation that I don't need when I'm standing on stage trying to start a song or something. So go with a Donner tuner. It's quick and it's accurate. If you don't want that, you want something a little more expensive, you could get the Turbo tuner, which is what I have. They just came out with the smaller version of it, which is great as well. So everything I've talked about so far is about $1,000. It could be even cheaper if you go used on reverb.com, which is what I always do. So that's about it. Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe and leave a comment if you have any questions. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.